At 4:37 a.m., 180 miles east of Luzon, a sonar operator inside the Combat Information Center of a U.S. Navy destroyer froze over a sound so faint it was almost nothing at all. No alarm blared, no missile lit the sky, just a whisper in the water, a shape moving where nothing should have been. And somewhere ahead in the darkness, a U.S. aircraft carrier kept steaming forward, unaware that for hours, something silent had been following it. The sea that night looked calm from above, black, flat, endless. But beneath the surface of the Western Pacific, the ocean was layered like glass and shadow. Warm water sat over colder currents. Sound bent in strange ways. Sonar contacts vanished, then reappeared miles from where they should have been. For submariners, it was perfect hunting water. For a carrier strike group, it was the kind of ocean that turned certainty into guesswork. At the center of that formation was a Nimitz-class U.S. aircraft carrier, surrounded by the usual steel shield of American naval power. Guided missile destroyers rode the outer screen. A cruiser monitored the air picture. An attack submarine somewhere ahead swept deeper waters. Above them, an E-2 Hawkeye tracked the sky, while FA-18 Super Hornets rested on the flight deck, ready for launch within minutes. It was the kind of formation built to project power across an entire region. The kind of force designed to make any adversary think twice. But what the crew didn't realize was that one of the most dangerous threats to a carrier does not come from the sky. It comes from below. The contact first appeared as a faint transient on the destroyer's towed array. Not a propeller beat, not a merchant ship, not the rhythmic thrum of civilian traffic passing through busy sea lanes. This was quieter than that, cleaner, controlled. A sound that suggested a submarine running slow, deep, and with extraordinary discipline. At first, nobody rushed to conclusions. The ocean plays tricks. A whale can sound mechanical. A distant fishing trawler can bounce through a thermal layer and appear much closer than it is. A sonar team that jumps at every ghost becomes useless fast. So the operator logged it, marked the bearing, and watched. Then the bearing changed. Not randomly, not with the drift of currents or surface traffic. It changed like something was maneuvering. Inside the carrier strike group, the mood shifted without a word needing to be said. On warships, tension rarely arrives all at once. It leaks in. A second look at a console. A quiet message passed from sonar to tactical action officer. A captain summoned to combat. A watch team that suddenly stops joking. Within minutes, the destroyer was no longer treating it as a curiosity. It was now a possible submerged contact. And in the waters of the Western Pacific, that meant one thing. Somebody had gotten close. Still, the carrier kept moving. That was deliberate. A carrier cannot reveal panic. If it changes course too suddenly, increases speed at the wrong moment, or launches aircraft for no clear reason, it tells the unknown contact that it has been detected. And if that contact belongs to a hostile submarine commander, then the hunt changes instantly. Now the submarine knows it has been noticed. Now it can act. So the American response was measured, quiet, calculated. And an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter lifted off in darkness, its rotors swallowed by the sea wind. A P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, already in the wider area, was redirected. Sonobuoy patterns were prepared. The cruiser adjusted its tactical picture. Destroyers spread slightly, tightening their anti-submarine screen without making the movement too obvious. Deep below, the carrier strike group's own attack submarine was tasked to shift and investigate. That was when the most unsettling detail emerged. The unknown contact was not simply nearby. It had been paralleling the carrier's course. For at least 3 hours. That changed everything. A submarine that stumbles near a carrier is one problem. A submarine that shadows a carrier for hours without being fixed is another entirely. That suggests patience, training, confidence. It suggests the submarine commander is not lost, not cautious, not merely observing from a distance. It suggests he is following on purpose. And if he is following on purpose, then he is learning the group's rhythm, measuring its escorts, studying its turns, calculating the blind angles between ship sonars, helicopter dips, and aircraft patterns. In other words, he may already have a firing solution. But what happened next shocked everyone. As the U.S. escorts widened their search, the contact disappeared, just vanished. No collapse of sound, no sudden cavitation, no clear turn away. One moment it was there as a faint but disciplined line on the tactical display. The next, the ocean swallowed it whole. The thermal layers were part of it. So was the submarine's skill. In the undersea world, silence is not just protection. Silence is a weapon. And somewhere beneath that carrier, or behind it, or just outside the escort ring, a submarine had gone invisible. That is the nightmare scenario for any carrier group, because above the surface, an aircraft carrier looks invincible. It carries strike fighters, electronic warfare aircraft, airborne early warning platforms, close-in weapon systems, rolling airframe missiles, escorting destroyers with Aegis radars and standard missiles, and enough sensors to build a floating city of warfare. But none of that changes a brutal fact of naval combat. If a hostile submarine gets into torpedo range, all that steel can become vulnerable in minutes. A modern heavy torpedo does not need to be spectacular to be decisive. It only needs to hit below the waterline. One strike can cripple propulsion. These two can flood compartments and ignite fires. Even without sinking a carrier, a submarine can mission kill it. Stop the deck cycle. Force damage control. Turn the most expensive symbol of American sea power into a retreating emergency. And that possibility was now hanging over the strike group like a shadow no radar could see. On the carrier, rumors started moving faster than official reports. A strange course adjustment, extra helicopter activity at night, more voices than usual over internal circuits. Sailors on the flight deck could sense the tension, even if they didn't know the reason. They looked out over black water and saw nothing. That made it worse. A missile can be tracked. A fighter jet can be intercepted. But an unseen submarine beneath the surface turns imagination into its own enemy. Still, the unknown boat remained patient. The first sonobuoy field yielded nothing. The second produced a brief acoustic trace, then lost it. A Seahawk crew dipped sonar over a suspected track and found only cold layers and empty water. The Poseidon widened the search box, laying more buoys in a pattern designed to corner a maneuvering submarine. The American attack submarine, operating under extreme discretion, moved to cut off likely escape routes. Then something unexpected happened. A destroyer on the outer screen reported a fleeting periscope feather. It lasted only seconds. Just a slight disturbance in the pre-dawn sea, a vertical line, a shape that vanished almost as soon as optics caught it. But it was enough. Periscope depth meant the submarine had come up deliberately, or had been forced higher during a turn. Either way, it confirmed the worst suspicion. The contact was real. It was close. And it was bold enough to risk exposure inside one of the most heavily defended naval formations on Earth. The strike group commander now faced a dangerous decision. Go aggressive, and you risk escalating a shadowing incident into an international crisis. Stay restrained, and you allow a hostile submarine to keep operating almost at will near a U.S. carrier. In geopolitics, the most dangerous moments are often not open battles. They are these narrow, silent confrontations where neither side wants the first shot, but both want the other side to blink. So the Americans pressed harder without crossing the line. Helicopters pushed farther out. Destroyers altered sectors. the carrier increased speed, forcing the group to stretch and compress in ways meant to disrupt a trailing submarine's solution. Aircraft launched at first light, not because they could attack the submarine directly, but because deck operations changed the entire geometry of a carrier's movement and protection. Every launch, every recovery, every turn into the wind alters the pattern below, and for a while, it seemed to work. The contact drifted aft, then farther out, then weak again. Some in the combat centers believed the submarine was disengaging. Maybe it had gathered its intelligence and decided not to press any closer. Maybe the Americans had finally pushed it outside effective torpedo range. Maybe the cat-and-mouse game was ending. It wasn't, because the submarine had not fallen behind. It had slipped inside. Okay, what the crew didn't realize until later was that during the confusion of course changes and thermal layers, the unknown submarine had used the carrier's own noise against it. A carrier at speed is loud by submarine standards. So are escort ships maneuvering in coordinated patterns. Beneath that blanket of machinery and cavitation, the shadowing boat masked its own movement and cut into the strike group's inner geometry, where detection could become even harder. That was the genius of the move. The safest place in a hunt can sometimes be the place your enemy assumes is already protected. Then at 6:12 a.m., everything changed. A passive sonar operator aboard one of the destroyers detected a sharp metallic transient from close astern of the carrier. Not a torpedo launch. Not yet. But unmistakably mechanical. Ballast trim. A control surface shift. Something heavy moving in water where no friendly submarine was supposed to be. Combat snapped into a new phase. Commands were repeated faster. Bearings were shouted. Helicopters banked hard toward the datum point. The carrier's escorts began converging, careful not to collide with one another while tightening the noose. On screens across multiple ships, plots updated in seconds. For a brief, terrifying moment, several officers believed they were about to hear the next sound every Navy fears in submarine warfare: weapon in the water. But that sound never came. Instead, through binoculars and electronic optics, sailors on the carrier's island saw something that made the entire formation stare. A submarine was surfacing, not miles away, not over the horizon, close enough to be seen with the naked eye. Water erupted along a dark hull as ballast tanks blew, and steel rose through the dawn. First the sail, then the full length of the boat, glistening under the gray morning light, cutting across the edge of the strike group's formation like a ghost, deciding it no longer needed to hide. It did not race away. It did not launch. It simply surfaced, held course, and made itself visible. For several stunned seconds, nobody moved. Then cameras came up. Identification teams worked furiously. Bridge crews tracked every detail. Helicopters circled at a cautious distance. Fighter jets overhead were redirected, not because they could sink a surface submarine without consequence, but because in a confrontation like this, every sensor matters. Every image matters. Every second of proof matters. And the message of that surfaced submarine was unmistakable. We were here. We stayed here. And if this had been war, the outcome might have been very different. The act was strategic theater, but it was also something more humiliating. By surfacing after shadowing the carrier for hours, the submarine commander was making a point to everyone involved, from sailors at sea to admirals ashore. He was demonstrating access, demonstrating stealth, demonstrating that despite layered defenses, helicopters, destroyers, towed arrays, sonobuoys, and doctrine refined over decades, a determined submarine had still managed to follow one of America's most protected assets deep into contested waters. That is why the incident became so unsettling, because no torpedo was fired, no missile system activated, no hull was breached. And yet everyone understood how close the margin may have been. The official language that followed was restrained. As it always is in moments like this, words like unsafe maneuver, professional shadowing, monitoring operation, and close interaction tend to replace what sailors actually feel in the moment. But beneath the careful phrasing sat a harder truth. Aircraft carriers remain among the most powerful instruments of military force ever built. They can launch strikes hundreds of miles inland, enforce sea control, support allies, and reshape a regional crisis simply by arriving. But they are not untouchable. Not in waters crowded by quiet diesel-electric submarines, not in choke points, not in layered anti-access environments, not when undersea warfare turns the ocean itself into camouflage. Demand, and the submarine commander understood that better than anyone. By the time the boat eventually moved off under heavy observation, the damage had already been done, not to steel, but to perception. Intelligence analysts would spend weeks reconstructing the approach. Sonar records would be replayed frame by frame. Commanders would review escort spacing, helicopter timing, acoustic conditions, and every course change made during those silent hours. Lessons would be written, tactics adjusted, assumptions challenged, because within seconds, everything had changed. Not on the surface, but in the minds of the people responsible for protecting a carrier in the next confrontation. Somewhere in that analysis, one conclusion would keep returning. The future of naval warfare may not be decided only by who has the bigger fleet, the newer fighters, or the longer-range missiles. It may also be decided by who can disappear better, who can wait longer, who can stalk without being seen. In an age of satellites, drones, ballistic missiles, and real-time surveillance, it is easy to assume the battlefield is more transparent than ever. But the ocean remains one of the last places on Earth where a single silent machine, crewed by a handful of men beneath hundreds of feet of water, can still alter the balance of power simply by being there. And maybe that was the real warning hidden in those dawn waves. Because the carrier kept sailing. The jets still launched. The strike group remained intact, but every sailor who saw that dark hull rise from the sea understood the same thing. Power is not only about what you can do to your enemy. Sometimes it is about how close your enemy can get before you even know he is there. And in the black water east of Luzon, for several long, quiet hours, a silent submarine had answered that question in the most chilling way possible.